in this real time. We'll make the recording available so that you can share it to people that might have wanted to join us this morning but could not. And also just for your own reference, I know these little reports from all the local action groups go by kind of fast. And that's why we ask people to send a written version to our secretary so that we can have a record of what was happening in that quarter. But also for you to cross-reference your own notes, or if you want to ask somebody a question, you know how to get a hold of them. You'll have the recording. All right, well, with that, I do want to welcome everyone. For anyone who's joining us new to our organization, my name is Kathy Rivera. I am the board president and president of the organization Communities for Sustainable Monterey County. We usually have many of our board members as we do today, but mostly this is a meeting for our local action group leaders to check in with one another and with the rest of the group to let us know what activities have been happening out in the county in their respective communities. And then also today, after we get done with our local action group reports, I'd like to give the floor to Leticia Hernandez, who is the head of the local urban gardeners in Salinas, who earned herself a slot in the MC Gives this cycle in 2021 with her big idea. And I won't take away any of her thunder. She can tell you all about her big idea. And then our special guest today is Michael DeLapa, who is the executive director of Landwatch. And we will probably be about at the 11 o'clock hour when we start his presentation. If you're thinking, we'll probably try to take a little break for people to get something to drink, another cup of coffee. For those of you who have come to our brunches back in the before times when we met in person, it's actually a very informal affair. And I kind of encourage everybody to feel relaxed and grab a cup of coffee for themselves or something to munch on and feel comfortable with, in the question and answer periods, raising your hand and getting a chance to comment and ask questions of any of the speakers throughout the entire event. This was one of the best ways for us to kind of keep ourselves glued together as an organization. And I don't want to lose that. So feel free to do that. Matt Hess, our treasurer, is the host who invited you all into the Zoom room, and he's going to help manage the room and recognize people. When there's so many people on the screen, it's hard for any one person to kind of keep track of who's trying to say what. So don't be shy and raise your hand, and please don't forget to unmute when you go to speak. Otherwise, it does help with transmission if we keep ourselves muted when we're not speaking. So I appreciate that, just to keep the Zoom transmission audible and intelligible to everybody. Okay, I think that's all of the housekeeping. I want to give a special welcome to a number of elected officials who have taken the time out of what I know are probably already overloaded schedules to attend. And in no particular order, we have Wendy Askew, our 4th District County Supervisor, Allison Kerr, the Mayor of Delray Oaks, Dave Pacheco, Council Member from Seaside, Ian Oglesby, the Mayor of Seaside, and Kim Shirley, our Council Member from Delray Oaks. All right, I see some of you waving there to introduce yourselves. And also not elected, but a very special person in our world of sustainability is Ashley Paulsworth, our Sustainability Manager for Monterey County. You may remember her from a brunch or two back when she gave a presentation on her sustainability plan for the county. All right, well, let's start at the top with Big Sur, B-Sage Advocates. Jessica, are you going to give us your presentation then?
Yes, I am. I hope everyone can hear me. Good morning. I share the co-coordinatorship of Big Sur Advocates for a Green Environment Action Group with Laverne McLeod, and we've agreed that I'm going to be the one presenting today. Laverne is very engaged with racial and climate justice, so I'm pretty amazed at all the things she's accomplished this quarter. I will say that our active membership is now relatively low, about 2 or 3 people. And I've noticed a definite shift in demographics down here. When homes sell, they tend to sell as vacation homes. So we're losing residents steadily, it seems like. We are still engaged in litter grabber giveaways. We like to do them in the spring and the fall. That way we have reasons for people to keep looking for our little notices in the local newspaper. We are thinking about doing a winter event. We generally do a dinner and a movie event, but we do have some concerns about that. If anyone has any feedback about inside events they've done, particularly as it pertains to ventilation and like bugs coming in on projector screens, I'd be interested to hear that. And also if anyone has any suggestions for rather short movies that we might show. Let's see, local environmental topics. Monterey Salinas Transit has canceled line 22, which was the only public transportation service to Big Sur. And from my perspective, they did it with relatively little notice. And I think that's about it. I'm really happy to be here this morning. Thanks.
Thanks, Jessica. How would you like people to respond to you on your ask for some short videos that you might be able to present? Ellen, do you have a suggestion there?
Yes. When Denise was alive, she put together a library of about 10 documentary films on various things like the true cost of clothing and waste for food. And so CSMC has them, and I believe Robert has them in his possession.
Thank you.
That's a wonderful suggestion. Thank you very much.
And I see Leticia is also putting in the chat that she has the film Kiss the Ground, which is very powerful film on regenerative practices in agriculture.
Nice.
And I know Robert is out of town, but I'm sure he'll be reading, watching the recording. And so we'll give him a nudge on getting you a list of those films, Jessica. All right.
Thank you.
Going on to Carmel, Sustainable Carmel.
Good morning. I'm Ellen Gannon. Also about the films, I want to say pre-COVID, we were teaming together to show some films at Carmel High. They provided the venue and we provided the films. That hasn't started up again. However, it's something to look forward to in the future. We continue to be a 3-person board, so I can relate to Be Sage. And it's kind of hard to encourage new membership when there's not much in the way of events to get out and have people meet and greet. Kathleen Craig is our chair. Chris Mack and I are the other board members. We continue to prefer not to do our monthly meetings on Zoom. We meet in the lush gardens at Kathleen's house. Our September meeting was a garden social, and it was on September 20th. It included the board and also Chris's wife, Karen Mack, and a former board member, Gretchen Sechrist Ortega, who was visiting us from Chico. Carmel by the Seas Climate Committee continues to meet monthly on the 3rd Thursday afternoon on Zoom. I am the representative. November 18th at 3:30 is a workshop to get community feedback on the draft adaptation strategies to increase the resilience of Carmel to climate change. Agnes is the city's environmental compliance manager. The biggest problem facing Carmel is sea erosion because Scenic Drive is very vulnerable to the sea, and depending upon how fast the climate, the ocean reclaims the land. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Let's see, next up we have Del Rey Oaks.
Hi, Kathy. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Karen.
I'm Karen Harris. I'm co-chair along with Kim Shirley. And just wanted to give you a little update. We've been awarded a grant by the Sierra Club for a wetlands delineation study. And that report has finally been completed. So we look forward to getting that out into the community, but it's especially going to help our city with future planning. And hopefully we'll get some volunteers to help us with the invasive species eradication. We had a creek cleanup recently in coordination with the nationwide cleanup day, and that was September the 18th. So we wanted to thank the MPC's Environmental Club for their grabbers and the kits that they provided, and also the CSMC, Kathy, and providing those for us so that we had enough. We had about 17 volunteers and we collected a lot of trash. So we look forward to doing that again because we want to do more to help clean up. We've been working hard with the 4TAG, the recreation trail, in support of it, along with CSMC. So we've been to several meetings, making comments, emailing at the City Council on August 24th, at the Monterey Peninsula Regional Park District, September 1. And at our recent, this week, we had a 4TAG information meeting on Tuesday, October 12th. So we've been advocating, helping to get flyers out, going door to door, trying to get people to realize that this is a really good project to be behind. We had a steering committee meeting August the 31st. So we started looking for what we're going to do in the future, including fundraising for a banner and butterfly garden signage, interpretive things, so we can help people understand how they can work integrated pest management into their lives in their garden. We're also looking at membership recruitment, planning for Earth Day next year. I don't know what that's going to look like. Future workshops like composting, vermiculture, and water conservation. And looking forward to single-use plastics ordinance and moving that forward. And we have Friends of Arroyo del Rey, and we would like volunteers to help us with the eradication and sampling and cleanups and things like that. We have a monthly regular membership meetings. That's the second Thursday of the month. Currently it's at 6 o'clock and Zoom. And we advertise that on Nextdoor. We send emails to our members. And we're now on the city website. So we're excited about that. We've been having butterfly garden maintenance. The butterfly garden is on city property, and we were allowed to put boxes in there with native plants. We have an owl box too, and a compost pile. And it's also a demonstration for sheet mulching. So that's kind of exciting. So it's right next door to the tennis courts, if you know where that is, between the church and the tennis courts. So we have a regular sign up sheet for people to volunteer, do maintenance like weeding things every week. So a couple people, we have a scheduled maintenance for new chips that we have donated by the city too. So we also have monthly email tips for earth-friendly households, single-use plastics. So that's on the city's strategic planning future goals. So we're excited about that. So we're going to continue to participate in the Plastics Coalition when they resume meeting, and also with the Monterey County Environmental Health when I don't know if anybody knows what they're doing. Like to hear about that. But we have drafted an ordinance that's really similar to the Seasides, which they recently passed. So way to go. Really proud of you guys. The Acorn is a city newsletter, and we're going to be outreaching with a large article. And the next edition's coming out mid-November. So we'll have a discussion about our current and future projects and tips to control runoff of fertilizer and pesticides during the rainy season, sewage overflow prevention by putting cooking oil and grease in the trash, scraping the plates, and also rodent control without poisonous baits. We have one more water conservation workshop that's been budgeted through CalAm and the Water Management District, but we haven't got that scheduled yet. But so those are just some of the things that we're working on, and I look forward to hearing about what you guys are doing too, so that we can support each other. Thanks for coordinating this, you guys.
Thanks, Karen. Right, Delray Oaks, small in space, but mighty. Yes, lots of really great things going on there. Okay, up next, Marina. Karen.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Karen Anderson and representing Citizens for Sustainable Marina. And we have an ongoing project at the Oak Woodland in Lock Patton Park, which is behind the Marina Library. So lately we've added, first of all, last quarter, we added raised garden beds, which we took over from the Goodwill Gardens on Imgen Parkway when that site had to shut down. So a number of those beds moved over to our site. And then we had an Eagle Scout come along and who needed a big project. So he built, he and his crew built 4 more beds, and they were filled with soil, and the team also made lids for them to keep squirrels out, mostly squirrels, I think. I'm glad to be here this morning because our newest Eagle Scout project is running slightly behind, and so we'll be taking it out, we'll be getting going tomorrow. Today he's cutting his lumber, and tomorrow they'll be out to install a 3-bed compost system at the same site. Now we are generating waste of a sort that would be great for composting. Our ongoing roadside cleanups have continue every month. We work on Del Monte Boulevard north of Marina out toward the landfill. We work at the entrance of Marina where Del Monte Boulevard exits and on-ramps from Highway 1. And then we have had a larger project and the Salinas Avenue Woods is our nickname for it. It's Salinas Avenue and Reservation Road going along there. When we first started out, our big project was back at Earth Day, and that included a lot of coordination with the people who live out there. So we've just had a few follow-ups since then. The city council was hearing from a developer who was being excoriated for having cut down a bunch of trees on an area of the property that he's developing into a park. So there really wasn't any excuse for cutting down the trees. But anyway, during public comments, I managed to say that the landscaping choices that they've made aren't so great for an area of Old Fort Ord. They're not consistent with what's native there. And so I asked that an ad hoc committee for the landscaping be created, and got a spot on the committee for Citizens for Sustainable Marina. So what we did since then, that was a few months ago, but what we've done since then is to get out to the site, to give them a list of all the plants that would be appropriate that are from there. We worked with Fred Watson on his list. I worked out of David Steyer's book, Flora of Fort Ord, and another source for that lists the pollinator quotients, I'm calling them, that oak trees have the highest amount of pollinators, and going on down the list. We had the list of monarch butterflies from the pollinator plants from monarchs. So that was a big thing. We've made our report back about the plants. And then the other aspect of that project has been to start collecting seeds. So Bruce Delgado, of course, has been our main coordinator of what seeds are ripening up where. And we've been all over collecting seeds and now planting them and growing seeds as a demonstration for the developer. I don't think they're actually going to be planting anything until next year's rainy season. We also have worked with a local Girl Scout troop to plant oak trees behind the baseball diamond, behind the bleacher zone at the Los Arboles Sports Complex. We've planted other native plants out there with the Marina High School Key Club. The Key Club members also come out to the Oak Woodland, and they're coming out today at noon. As soon as I leave here, I'll be joining that. And we did one front yard cleanup for an elderly person in the city of Marina. And I think those are our highlights. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen. A lot to fit into 5 minutes, and you managed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And on to Monterey.
Okay, in Monterey, our demographics are a little different than all of yours. We are continuing our focus on plastic pollution and at two ends of the stream. One is the cleanup, like y'all have been doing. But we have so many other organizations like Save Our Shores, Surf Riders. And so they really approach Tice, our park manager, for cleanups. And as I've said before, we partner with Blue Zones projects to get cleanups going. Something happened, there was a September 7th one that was sponsored by Blue Zone Projects and Surf Rider, and we connected them and provided cleanup materials. But Tice, our park manager, he says people are coming to him saying, hey, I want to do a cleanup, organizations. And he connected me with a guy who was the editor of Foolish Times, Steve Pronsi. And because we both have been saying we need to get this on a regular, consistent, cleanup, either a schedule in place. So you're not tripping over each other, and people, if they want to contribute or volunteer, they know where to go when. So we had a first meeting with everybody who was expressed interest, and we had Marina represented, Seaside, Monterey, and Pacific Grove couldn't make it, but we're learning about their practices. And Steve Pacheco came. It was really, really great. And what we're really focused on is I'm going to talk with Blue Zones Project to see how we can get one kind of platform and really leverage their volunteer recruitment infrastructure. But then we also said we need to share best practices and get consistent communication and education. So Dave said that the cities compete with each other, and so when you go to one city, they have one ordinance, and then you can go across the street and get something that's compliant there but not compliant where you are. And so we need to get some consistent, we want to work across the city lines to get consistent communication, education, and just kind of work up the stream, because these volunteer cleanup opportunities are also an opportunity to educate the community, and we just want to generate respect and education, and have these self-sustaining cleanups so that people, so there won't be waste to clean up. So anyway, that's what we're doing on the waste management. And then on the then working upstream, we have this Plastic Pollution Coalition, which I'm kind of taking the lead with Barbara Meister, because she's from the aquarium and she's like totally, involved in getting the aquarium up and running. So we have met monthly, and we are celebrated the wins with Seaside's ordinance. But our last meeting, and the people on this committee, and everybody's invited, it's very loose, but we have all the waste management haulers. We have almost everybody from CSMC. We have the aquarium and city council, the environment commissions from other organizations, and sustainability managers in these cities. And helping, we celebrated Seaside's win, and also the Governor Newsom signing of like 4 or 5 plastic pollution laws, which are great, but the proof is in the pudding and implementing them. But Lacey came to our last meeting, and she was really quite chagrined, because here she is asking Seaside restaurants to pay more for compostable plastics that are compliant, but learning through these waste managers, they are not compostable. They're just as toxic, and they go into the landfill. And so we're really struggling with that. And there was a conference in May called the Plastic Pollution Crisis in California. And out of that came a site called Upstream, like working upstream. To make a long story short, the only way out of this is to use reusables. And so we're looking after, researching businesses. There's one in Portland, actually San Francisco, Santa Cruz, all around the world, where it's like a subscription basis, where you pay, you do a checkout for a reusable container, and then you have a drop off, or even in San Francisco, they come and pick it up. And so we're researching that as a green business and figuring out how can we, get this going in the Monterey area as a pilot. And Colleen from PG is really interested, and we're all just kind of interested. We kind of need a gunslinger. We need an entrepreneur. I think we can get the funding, but there's a lot of logistics, as you can imagine. And so that's what we have, a kind of a sub task force of this Plastic Pollution Coalition looking at that. This Plastic Pollution Coalition is also used by the waste management people to come and test as a sounding board to test drive some of these public communications and education messages. So we'll be listening to their kind of pitches, giving them feedback on what we think will work, because it needs to be consistent across all the cities. So that's our update. And if anybody wants to join this Plastic Pollution Coalition, or just get minutes on them, or have anything to contribute to this green business, reusables as a business, I would love to hear from you.
Okay, there's the challenge. That's a lot of points to connect with. Yeah, you may know that Lori, in addition to all the other things that she is serving as, is our Vice President of Local Action Group Coordination. And I think her efforts are really starting to produce results in getting everyone's individual disparate efforts to coordinate so that we don't duplicate effort, that we can leverage what we've learned individually as local action groups, and then start sharing resources. And she's also been a really great example of partnering with organizations outside of CSMC, of course, whose goals and objectives overlap with ours. And united in that way, not only do we have more volunteerism and more hands to do work, but we also have more influence. So I congratulate Lori and really encourage you to respond, if you can, to any of her calls for action and get involved with these all across the county types of efforts. Okay, Pacific Grove.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathy Wooten. I am co-chair of Sustainable Pacific Grove with Colleen Ingram, who is out of town. And I haven't been to a brunch for a while. So nice to see everyone. I also want to introduce the newest member of the PG Steering Committee, Susan Myers. You can wave, Susan. Susan, I believe, is also now a board member of CSMC, and we're very happy to have Susan have joined us. She was previously involved to a limited degree with Sustainable Pacific Grove a couple of years ago, but now is living full-time in the community. So we're really glad to have her with us. In addition to that, I wanted to mention that Colleen, Susan, and myself are all commissioners on the PG Beautification and Natural Resources Commission, which is a city commission. So we're 3 out of 7 members on the commission. So we're feeling like we're going to be able to hopefully have an influence on what the commission does, which is related to sustainability, and also therefore on the city council. So it's kind of an exciting year ahead of us. So I'm just going to update you briefly on some of the things that Pacific Grove is doing. One of which is in setting the goals for the BNRC, so that commission I mentioned, we were able to include a climate action plan research goal. So that will be something that we'll be working on in the coming year. One of our goals for the year was also to become more involved in pollinator protection. So we will be working with Public Works, our community garden, the Natural History Museum, and the Monarch Sanctuary to probably the goal will be involving education of the community in terms of how to plant native plants for pollinators. And we're particularly interested, of course, in PG and the monarchs, but it applies to all pollinators. So that's going to be something that we're working on and are working on now. Our community garden this year is celebrating, I think it's their 10th anniversary in November, and they're going to be doing press releases, programs on soil building and so forth. So we're going to be supporting that as well. We are also initiating a project. This is going to be across the citywide, so Public Works and the city and the owners of Adventures by the Sea, Frank and Michelle Knight. We're going to be working on a project at Lovers Point, which will involve trash collection and management and education of the visitors, because Lovers Point is such a attraction for not only the local residents, but also tourists. And trash has been really a difficult issue there, particularly plastic and non-reusable items. So this joint project is going to involve what we're calling ambassadors, which will be volunteers that Sustainable PG will recruit and help train, along with Frank and Michelle Knight's employees who are at Lovers Point. So we're going to be training these ambassadors to interface with the public, to help the public who picnic there and so forth dispose of their trash properly, and also to educate them about feeding the wildlife, our various rodents that we have to deal with. And in addition to that, we're going to be implementing an art project with the community and inviting local artists to paint marine pictures of some kind, marine art, on the waste disposal, trash can, and transformers and the other kinds of dumpster things that are at the park. So that's going to involve the community. We're really excited about that. Let's see what else. We're going to start up our monthly programs again in November. We haven't held them because they were always in-person events at the Natural History Museum, and we haven't wanted to do that because of COVID, but we're planning on our first one in mid-November. And we're going to be starting to table at the Monday Farmers Market in Pacific Grove, talking about plastic disposal of plastic, reusing, using reusables, excuse me, and hopefully also talking to people about native plant gardens. So that will be starting up very shortly. And that's my update. And thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. Good to see your face again at our gathering here. All right, Salinas.
Robin Lee here. As you've been hearing, we have a big MC Gives project going on that Leticia will talk about a little later. As other groups, we're kind of losing members for our steering committee for various reasons. So we're going to have to work a little more and grow that up. And so the projects that have been going on is the urban garden and the Tibet Creek Park, which has been Letty Hernandez project for many years now. And we also have a native plant garden in Santa Rita Park, which the Santa Rita Bolsono's Watershed Group, which is part of Sustainable Salinas, has been working with on and off over the last 15 years probably. So the native plant garden, we're going to be working on that in January with the Santa Rita Elementary Schools right next to it. And one of the teachers there has been on various programs with the native plant garden. So we're going to do a seed bombing project in February. And there's a company that makes the materials for that. So it's good for the kids to handle and it's not expensive. So it's compost based and clay. So you can buy tubes of this stuff and safe for the kids to handle. They won't get briars in their hands from the stuff you might get from the city, for instance. So we'll use that and the kids will make them in class and then go out there and have at it. Throw it down on the ground and hopefully we'll have some rain. So something will come from this. But before that, we're partnering with Blue Zones to clear the ground where they can do this. So there's some areas where the native plants that have been installed over the years haven't thrived. So we'll clear it out and put some more seed down and hopefully generate some more native plants in those areas. And we also eventually do a sheet mulch project. There's an area of the original garden that was put in conjunction with Return of the Natives that green blackberry is taken over. So get that cleared out, do a sheet mulch to try to eradicate the rootstock. So as people who have dealt with blackberry know, this is an ongoing battle. So it's the Himalaya invasive type, which fights back. If you want to cut it out, it actually scratches and claws its way back at you. So you have to be very careful with it. So we also have our intrepid urban farmer, Harriet Stevens, who's trying to get the city to have an ordinance for chickens. They're illegal right now, but everybody has them, but illegally. So not much is being done if you do have them, unless your neighbors complain. So we're trying to get that legal. And she's also worked with the city and trying to get people to be able to sell their produce at their home. So if they have excess produce, that they'll be able to sell it. So that hasn't gotten too far, but she has been working on it with the city. We'll just have to see if that's going to happen or not. So that's it. And Letty, of course, later we'll talk more about her project.
Well, I do have a little bit of an update. So the garden in this quarter, we were able to put in the bike rack. So our infrastructure is changing a little bit. We also installed, with the help of Blue Zones and Salinas Valley Memorial Healthcare Systems, we installed an outdoor classroom. So there's seating out there now. These beautiful little stumps that we got from Pebble Beach, and we just painted over top of them. So that's out there. It's about 20 of them. So small class size, well spaced. Through partnership with Shinampa, we celebrated the Latinx Engineering Day in the garden, where we had a really cool hydroponic setup, and we talked about growing food, and we had a little activity where young people were able to put together a little setup with it was called a root ecosystem, where they're able to grow seeds and observe the roots in a little tic-tac-toe. And then we had folks from Stanford University and CSUMB do a panel discussion, which I was able to sit on as well. And upcoming events. I think one thing Robin forgot to mention also is we recently tabled at a ride and drive event for like electric vehicle test driving and stuff like that, which was a great way for us to get out in the community and get people signed up and just starting our email list back up again. And hopefully we'll get some folks out of that for our steering committee. And then upcoming events, October 23rd is Make a Difference Day, and there's a huge park cleanup happening, and we're doing a little workshop in the garden around noon with Return of the Natives. And then November 2nd, it's a Tuesday, but we're doing a Dia de los Muertos celebration with a community altar and some festivities and crafts and stuff. So that's my
All right.
update.
Thanks, Letty. Wow, lots happening in Salinas. Catherine Crockett for Sustainable Seaside. Well, last but not least.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. So in July, end of July, the city of Seaside passed the single-use plastic pollution ordinance that Lori mentioned, and some of the Sustainable Seaside members spoke in public comment to support that. The City Council unanimously approved it, and it'll be implemented starting in March, and we hope to be part of that effort. In August, end of August, we hosted a table at the West End Celebration in Sand City. We do that every year. Surprisingly large turnout. We encouraged people to visit the Fort Ord National Monument, and we handed out over 100 BLM trail maps. We also used the event as an opportunity to promote our October 2nd Pollinator Garden Park tour. And so then in September, we partnered with Save Our Shores and Seaside High School's Ocean Defenders student group to organize a cleanup at Laguna Grande Park. And we had about 20 volunteers, 10 of which were from the Ocean Defenders student group. We collected 46 pounds of trash and 27 pounds of recyclable material. And 46 pounds of trash, maybe that doesn't sound like much, but it's all these bits, cigarette butts and pieces of plastic and stuff. So that was all cleaned up. That was part of the annual California Coastal Cleanup Day and was among more than 80 events organized in the Monterey Bay area. So in October 2nd, we joined up with CSUMB's Return of the Natives, Friends of Seaside Parks, City of Seaside, and Seaside's Environmental Commission to organize a tour of 8 Seaside Pollinator Garden Parks. And the tour was organized to encourage people to view the newly established pollinator gardens that we've been working on for 2 years now, and also learn how to establish pollinator gardens in their own areas, their own property. So everyone who participated was issued a biking, walking tour map and a park passport. And each park featured an info booth with resources for creating and maintaining pollinator gardens. We had seed giveaways, native pollinator plants for small donation, and over 100 people attended. And we had good outreach in the neighborhoods, door to door actually, and then good press. The Monterey County Weekly gave us an 831 column feature story. So I think that was a big success. So we've got these ongoing weekly Saturday Park cleanup events. Since May of 2021, Sustainable Seaside has been working with Friends of Seaside Parks and the City of Seaside in a series of weekly Saturday Park cleanups. Volunteers pull weeds, lay mulch, pick up litter, and tend the pollinator gardens. And the series is scheduled through the end of 2021 and may be ongoing into the new year. So planned, we've got, Seaside has community visioning on East Side development, and we're encouraging people to participate in the charrette hosted by the City of Seaside. That's scheduled for October 24th, 27th, and 29th. And Sustainable Seaside has not taken a public position on Seaside East development, but we do support smart growth as an approach to development that can help address environmental sustainability and the challenges of climate change and the economic disparities that exist in our community. So, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I guess first of all, before we give the floor back to Letty to talk about MC Gives, does anybody have any questions of any of our LAG leader reporters? Anything that went by a little bit too fast that you'd like more information on? Go ahead and either, I prefer if you raise your hand in the app, so that, because it's kind of hard to see everyone with their hand raised or not. I'm not. Ellen Gannon.
Yes, I want to, I thank Be Sage because you're in a similar location that we are and have a smaller group, and just say thank you to the bigger cities for all you're doing and giving me ideas of what we can try to work on here. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Anyone else? Uvis, yes. Please unmute yourself.
Yavuz.
Yavuz.
Good morning. Great to be here. And I'd like to thank Mike DeLapa actually mentioning about his talk this morning. And I've been trying to connect with you guys over a year.
Oh,
And finally, this was a day. And it's great to hear all these great projects in our community. Just, my name is Yavuz Attila. Just a little background. I came to Monterey in 1988 to attend Naval Postgraduate School, got my master's. I was in the Turkish Navy, but ended up coming back in 92 and resigning from Navy and established here in Monterey and worked for Monterey Institute about 12 years. Now I own my IT business and been in Rotary for over 16 years and with Monterey Kennedy Row Rotary and served as a district governor with 58 clubs with 2,600 Rotarians. And in the last 2 years, I've been involved with Rotary Action Group for environmental sustainability. And it's a great to my heart, you know, for our future, for our children, and see all this passion here this morning and hear all the projects. I know it's all coming from heart. And over 18 months, I've been serving also Rotary Action Group coordinator for the Western Coast with 15 states. And we have all the way from California to Alaska, New Mexico to Montana, Alberta, and building our membership. And we started April 2020 with 83 members. Now we are almost 400 members. A lot of clubs, a lot of districts in our Western Coast. Really, you know, as Rotarians, you know, we are new in the game and we need a lot of expertise, a lot of leadership to join us and really work together for our future generation and live a better world for the next generation. And you know all the issues that what's going on with the environment and climate. So that's what, again, thank you, Mike, for inviting, and really we are getting connected. And just want to, you know, June 2020, Rotary adopted environment or protecting the environment as the area of focus, because we had 6 earlier ones like peace, sanitary, motherhood, education, you know, all the other areas now. And starting from July 1st, 2021, now we have money to, you know, put on the projects. And good news for Monterey, my club, Monterey Kennedy Row, which I started in 2012. We are partnering with 3 clubs, Monterey Rotary Club and Monterey Pacific Club, because Rotary has a lot of, you know, grants and projects. And each club, we put $500 and Rotary match that with $2,000 for each club. So we have $7,500 project planting trees for City of Monterey. So on 23rd Saturday, we're going to be working with City Forester and planting trees. I think each one costs $150. And 23rd Saturday morning, and we'll be at the Monterey Cemetery. And you're welcome to join us. We'll be there at 9 to 1 o'clock. And that's very close. And this year, our district governor gave clubs like $5,000 projects for doing something for community. And our area, in coastal area, we have about 18 or 19 Rotary clubs in Monterey County. And these clubs are really looking for projects, especially for environmental projects. So, you know, hearing from Seaside, from Salinas, from, you know, King City we have there, and Monterey Peninsula, you know, they have the money, you know, they want to do something. And we also work with our youth clubs like Interactors, high school students, or Rotaract. Like we have the CSU Monterey Bay, there's a Rotaract club, also they have Interact club. We are collaborating with them. And on November 20th, the 18 clubs here has a project in Laguna Seca for planting 2.5 acres for, like you guys mentioned, monarch attracting, pollinator attracting flowers and milkweed and other seeds. And we'll be planting there on November 20th, Saturday morning, again in Laguna Seca from 9:30 till 2:30 with a barbecue at lunch. So I will leave my email. You're welcome to connect with me so we could, you know, you're welcome to inviting all the volunteers to help us. Again, thank you and happy to be here. And I have so many things, but I don't want to take much time. And, we have clubs in the Bay Area installing solar panels to the nonprofit organizations for helping with climate action. And my club, Canary Row, working with Monterey Bay Aquarium for a Baja project. We're going to exchange teachers and students from Baja to our area. And that's what it works, because in that area, that hotels and tourism industry wants to build more hotels, and they want to keep their water resources and their beautiful nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Yavuz, I regret that we were so hard to connect with. We'll have to bring that up with the board to make ourselves a little more accessible.
Yes.
It sounds like we are kindred organizations, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to partner. Yes, I'll be very happy to.
Ellen, you had a question? Quickly? Oh, just applauding. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to give the floor back to Leticia then to talk to us about her big idea.
Thank you, everyone. So we were selected for the MC Gives campaign for the big idea. I don't have any slides prepared, so I did just kind of want to run through this. I know I've presented multiple times with you guys, but the big idea that we presented is we're interested in growing our community garden at Natividad Creek Park. Most of you have been out there, maybe not all of you. So I'll go do a quick little backstory about that. We started 5 years ago. This is our 5th year out at Natividad Creek Park in Salinas. We have, we organized as volunteers, we built it as volunteers, and it's being managed as volunteers currently. But we feel that the next phase of our evolution would require a paid coordinator position. And so, and this is going to help support our programming. And so we applied for the MC Gives campaign with the big idea to support three programs specifically. So the funding for the MC Gives would go to support a garden prescription program. And this is in partnership with healthcare providers locally. We are inviting 10 youth and their families to have a raised garden bed at Natividad Creek Park, and providing support to teach them how to grow some food that they're familiar with, that they like, that they're interested in. And this idea is just to support them physically and mentally and even spiritually. I think out in nature, it's a lot of healing and it for the whole person, right? Because you're moving, you're stretching, you're admiring different things, you're engaging your mind, and it's an exciting program that we hope to support through the MC Gives funding. The second program is called the Farm to Lab Table Program, and this is in partnership with another organization called Chinampa Bio. And Chinampa Bio is a new nonprofit in our area started by a few locals that are in the bioengineering field. And so we're interested in bio art, so like making materials out of different cultures. So right now, Chinampa is doing kombucha leathers and different art projects. They do things with hydroponics and talking about how, how we can, connect both things happening in the lab and in the garden. And so through this partnership, we hope to train young adults and teens to collect and understand crop data, to be able to analyze different data around water. And the program would empower individuals with scientific tools and knowledge to conduct experiments. And so one of the ideas is, putting a weather station out there and being able to record the temperature and the different changes in the weather. And in the garden, we have this really lovely microclimate because we're nestled kind of in like a valley in the valley right next to the creek. And so there's a lot of great things to be talking about. The Farm to Lab Table program would also allow for students to be out in the garden collecting data, but then take their information and take their resources or materials into the lab. And the lab being the Shinampa Lab, which is located at the old firehouse station in downtown Salinas, and that's 210 Salinas Street. So that would be part of the funding would go towards that. And then another really exciting program is the paid summer internship program for youth. And this is with the partnership through my work with the Center for Land-Based Learning. And I run a farms leadership program where we are creating a pathway into agriculture and environmental sciences. And part of that pathway is getting young people out into the industry and getting them some experience with, getting some experience in agriculture or in environmental sciences. And so by providing a paid internship, we actually piloted it this summer, and we had them out there painting the raised garden beds. We had them planting and watering and engaging with folks in the neighborhood that just walk by and enjoy the garden. And I think that it really opened their eyes up to the community aspect of agriculture and growing food. And I truly enjoyed being out there with the youth this summer. And so that's another thing that the MC Gives campaign would be supporting. And it's a really decent paid internship. It's very micro. I did 4 weeks, 4 hours a week, and we paid them $18.75. And I think that's something that really captures young people's interest, is being paid a living wage or, a relatively decent wage, when they can be working at Target for almost $16.50. We really want them to continue in that pathway. And so the garden being one of the first internships we've been able to provide for students is very exciting. And I hope to continue that and maybe even add more. So adding more students to it or just lengthening the duration of their time with us. And then I also, so that's the big idea in a nutshell, but I did also want to shout out, we do have a service learner here today. Ashley, if you want to say hi. And I have a few other service learners that are going to be supporting the MC Gives campaign in multiple ways. As you guys know, once it starts, which is November 11th, it really just goes, right? I think the best way of doing is word of mouth. And I remember when we were fundraising for the tree campaign, being able to go to events like Pacific Grove, to one of your film showings, and being able to speak to people has always been very helpful for us. So if you have any opportunities for me to just pop into a Zoom meeting and talk a little bit about what we're doing at Natividad Creek Park, I think that's going to be really huge in the success of this campaign. And then also we have a challenge gift opportunity here before the event kicks off on November 7th. And we've already received a generous donation from a local organic fertilizer company called True Organics, which is $5,000 to kickstart this campaign. So I'm really excited about it. I know it's going to be a lot of work, but already we're on the right track. It's a garden and everybody loves gardens, right? So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to go into more detail. And if anybody wants to come out for a tour, I would love to do that as well.
Wow. When Letty comes up with a big idea, it's really big. It's all so worthy. I'm especially excited about getting young people in the STEAM realm and not afraid of studying technology and science when they get hands-on exposure. Anybody else have any questions quickly before we move on to our guest speaker? Okay, great. I'm not seeing any. So I'm gonna switch my screen here so that I can properly introduce our guest speaker. If I can get that screen to come up. Yeah. Here we go. Yeah. Michael DeLapa serves as the executive director of Landwatch Monterey County, a nonprofit organization that he founded in 1997 to promote healthy communities and sustainable climate-friendly growth. Drawing on advances in climate change science, Michael will discuss projected regional and local impacts of climate change, including sea level rise and changes in patterns of temperature, rain, drought, and fire along the Central Coast. He'll explain what we know and what we don't know about climate change, how we know it, how climate is expected to change globally, what will this mean for Monterey County residents, and what we can do and should do about it. Over a 40-year career of social and private entrepreneurship, Michael has founded or helped to launch a variety of ventures, including Landwatch, the California Fisheries Fund, the California National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, Sea Studios Foundation, Arena Solutions, Photo Notes, and CBVA Monterey. He has held interim executive roles as Chief Operating Officer for New Leaf Paper and Vice President of Marketing for the Clean Tech Group, and consulted with many organizations on strategy and marketing. Michael's experience range from coastal management to natural history filmmaking, to high-tech startups, to political campaigns, to applied ocean science. He is an avid beach volleyball enthusiast, hiker, river runner, and Stanford sports fan. Michael received his Master's of Business Administration degree and public management credentials from the Stanford Graduate School of Business and its public management program. He also holds Master of Science and Bachelor of Science degrees in biology from Stanford University. So without further delay, I would like to hand the floor over to Michael for his presentation today. Thank you so much for coming and being with us.
And Kathy, thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for the introduction. And let's see if I can get my screen going here. Are you seeing the screen, I hope?
Not yet. We practiced this, we should, there we go.
Is it working now? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay, full screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as Kathy mentioned, I'm delighted to chat with you today about climate change and what it means for our area. If this is a topic that you're interested in, and I expect many of you are, I invite you to attend our virtual event, which we are having on November 5th. So we've got a number of outstanding speakers, including Annie Nodoff, who is on my board and who is head of NRDC's lobbying for about 30 years, Fran Pavley, who wrote AB 32, and it'll be a great presentation. So I hope you can make that. So I've got some main messages I'd like to leave you with. I'm going to start with them. So as I go through the presentation, you can sort of keep these things in mind. So brace yourself, because there are some big changes that are going to be coming with climate change. The science reveals it, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the science, not a lot, but a little bit. History is a poor teacher, and that means that we should not be looking to the past for lessons. We need to really rethink how we view cities and what we're doing by looking to the future. The status quo is a bad role model. So as you think about what you see in cities, that is not what they need to be, and that's not where we need to be going. They have to be redesigned almost from the ground up for sustainability, and I'm going to tell you what we think that looks like, or at least what the science tells us. What you know and what you act on, we see as giving hope and resilience. And if you do a lot of, if you learn a lot and you really, are out there acting and trying to make change, for me, that means radical hope. And really radical hope is what we all need at this very challenging time. So I'm hopeful I can leave you with some positive messages, but really there's kind of a grim story that I'm going to tell you. This is really about, if you're my age, doing it for your children and your grandchildren. Okay, so let me just start out with some context and some thanks to people. And I like to ask people, is there anybody on this call who is a climate scientist? And if you are, can you tell me what the Stefan Boltzmann constant is in this model? And most people, me included, look at this model and look at the equations and you go, okay, that's pretty intensely mathematic, and it's not something I do every day. And this is not what I do. However, I have some great people that I work with, Dr. Shaw, Dr. Samarow. Dr. Shaw, who I happen to be married to, is the chief scientist for World Wildlife Fund and was on the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. Dr. Samarow is a National Academy of Science member who was the head of Hopkins Marine Station. So people like this who spend their days looking at equations and models and data, these are the people that I draw on to help me put together my presentations and to to fact check what I'm doing. So this is where all my work comes from. It's drawing on people like this. So shifting gears, I just wanted to mention a couple things about Landwatch. We started with a view to organizing people in the community to improve sound land use policies that better our community. Now we're relaunching in the next couple months, and we're going to be specifically talking about climate change, community health, and social inequities in housing and infrastructure. In reality, we haven't really changed, but our mission is being more intent given to specifically housing and climate. And I'm going to tell you a lot about housing and climate. We have, from the beginning, 5 guiding principles: creating workforce housing in our communities, trying to draw urban growth boundaries so that we don't sprawl into natural areas, protecting farmland, making sure we have adequate infrastructure before we build, and having efficient, cost-effective regulation. We work in Monterey County in each of the 12 cities, and that's a lot of places to work. We also work at a whole variety of special districts, the Water District. We have scientists and people that do technical review of projects and policies. So we look at general plans, we look at specific developments. We do a lot in the way of getting information out for public education. We organize campaigns to lobby around projects. Many of you I met during the Monterey Downs work. When all else fails, we do litigate. We have attorneys that we work with, and we use the California Environmental Quality Act and other laws to make sure that local governments are doing what they need to be doing. And we want to provide housing leadership on housing and climate generally. So that's the kind of work that we do and have been doing for 24 years. So I'm going to shift gears another time and tell you a little bit about climate change. If people say they believe in climate change or don't believe in it, it's kind of the wrong thing to say. It's not a belief, it's part of the scientific method. It's what we know about how the Earth revolves around the sun. It's how we know that our cell phones work. It's established by reproducible, peer-reviewed research, and it's really fundamentally math, physics, chemistry, and biology. So it's not a belief system, it's a set of rigorous processes that start with hypotheses and collecting data. Climate isn't weather, so people often confuse these things. Climate change is something that happens on a decade scale. Weather is something that happens on a very short-term scale. So sometimes people confuse these things, but just to be absolutely clear, climate is not weather. And I think Stephen Colbert made this point very well when he was a broadcaster and he had his program. You know, just because something happens one day is not a trend. So how do we know what we know about climate change? Well, really it comes down to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is an international group of scientists. They get together periodically and they look at the research that's been published. In 2014, when my wife served on the panel, there were 222,000 peer-reviewed publications that were part of the process. That number has probably doubled, so there's probably close to 400,000 or 500,000 now. And the scientists go through that and they come to a consensus on what's happening with the climate globally, and the models then are used regionally. But all of that work is very conservative. So scientists tend to be really slow in some ways to draw conclusions about what's happening because they all have to agree on what the data says. This is a short list of leading scientific organizations that have confirmed human-induced global warming is taking place. There's a much longer list, but virtually every scientific organization globally has now acknowledged that climate change is something that we are causing by releasing fossil fuels. This is really an interesting early data set that I'm going to show you that was developed by Dr. Keeling at Scripps. And this is just a short video, but it'll give you an idea of some of the data that people collect. And this is very recent data. So that shows you data that's basically been collected from CO2 in the atmosphere since the 50s. At the end of the presentation, there was a graph that showed the CO2 concentrations based on ice core data for a much longer period of time. And here's that graph. This is about 400,000 years. And you can see for 400,000 years, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere did not go above 300 parts per million until the 1950s. And at that point, it started to skyrocket. And today it's about, literally today, it's about 413 parts per million. So that's the problem. We've put a enormous amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere in a really short period of time. I think everyone understands now the greenhouse effect, that as you put carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the carbon dioxide retains the heat that's coming in from the sun, and that warms the planet. And carbon dioxide and methane and other gases are therefore known as greenhouse gases. This is some research that was put together by Dr. Somero that basically shows that as CO2 has gone up, so has global temperature. So there's a direct linear correlation, somewhat linear correlation, I should say, between the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere and the rise of global temperatures. This really isn't new news. Back in 1912, it was first hypothesized in some scientific notes. Scientists back then began to understand that CO2 was a effective blanket for warming up the earth. And so this is not something scientifically that is just come out of nowhere. It's been in the literature for quite a long time. I also want to just make clear that as we look at data, it does differ geographically. So if you just look at data sets across the US, and this is the average change in temperature from 1895 to 2018, you can see on average, it's increased across our country, but it's changed in different ways. So for example, Los Angeles, it's gotten hotter faster than it has in Louisiana. So temperature changes are not evenly distributed. They affect the planet differentially by, just geographic differences in how the planet is structured. So this is really the slide that captures a lot of people's attention. It's a bit hard to read, but I think the key point here is that if you go back, you have to go back 2.6 million years to the Pliocene before temperatures were, the CO2 levels were this high. So it's been a really, really long time before we've seen CO2 levels this high. And back then, there were trees on the South Pole. So we are looking at a series of physical and geophysical changes to the planet that really haven't ever been seen. As some scientists have pointed out, there's no comparison in all of Earth's history for how fast these changes are taking place. And one scientist likened this to a meteorite hitting the planet. So, that is a kind of a wake-up call. And, I think people that study these issues are certainly more aware and more shaken by some of the data than the average person on the street. Climate change, though, is more than just global warming. There are a whole host of cascading impacts that occur as CO2 goes up. So, you have changes in ocean temperatures as well as atmospheric temperatures, increased acidification of the oceans because you have more CO2 going in, sea level rises, a whole bunch of other changing geochemical and physical aspects of the oceans and the land. So these things interact in ways that aren't fully understood. And I think, again, the cautionary tale for many scientists is, hey, we really, really need to stop pumping CO2 into the atmosphere. One of the things I learned as a very early student in ecology back in the 70s is that everything is connected to everything else. This is something that Da Vinci noticed, something that John Muir wrote about, and something that if you, if you're around and you're looking at the planet, you see all these things are deeply connected. So what does this all mean for California? And therefore, what does it mean for Monterey County and Seaside? California has done its own climate assessments. They've gone through 4. And what they do is they look at the global data, and then they look at the regional models. So they look at how the models are what's happening specifically in the state of California, and they draw conclusions based on the data that's being collected here locally. So we have our own sort of mini climate change assessment that happens. We know that temperatures are rising in California throughout the state on an average. So temperatures are definitely going up. We know, according to the models, that they're going to continue to go up, and they're expected to rise, say, 6 to 9 degrees by 2100. That may not sound like a lot, but that is a very, very different California than the California that we've known. Part of what that means is we're going to see more droughts and more variable precipitation. So here in our area, we can expect to have our water supplies challenged and our agriculture challenged. And I think Salinas Valley is particularly vulnerable. On the coast, we have some mitigation from coastal fog, but as you move inland, that fog becomes less effective in reducing the high temperatures. We're going to see more fires, and I think that this is really something that we need to be thinking about locally, particularly in our in the interface between our wildlands and county lands where people want to build. We're already seeing insurance costs rising and people losing insurance in places like Kashawa. I think that's going to only get worse, and it's going to make it more challenging to build and to live in those areas. I used to show this slide and point out that in 2000, when I showed the slide 2017, the biggest fires were in 2000, the early 2000s, 2010, there were some large fires, but mostly you kind of look and say, okay, there's some big fires that were taking place since 1932. They've been mostly recent. This is the new data. In the fires in 2020 overwhelmed all the fires that were taking place in years previous. So it's often said that the worst year in the current decade is going to be the best year in the future decade. And I think the wildlife data is really compelling. And we've seen it, obviously here in our area with the huge fires last year. Sea level rise is going to be another issue, expected to rise 3 to 7 feet in the Pacific coast by 2100. Right now, it's tracking the higher level, and that's going to have some very significant impacts on coastal cities. It's going to mean a loss of a lot of our beaches, and we know, for example, at Monterey, Carmel Beach, there's been a historic erosion over the last 20 years of about a foot a year. That's according to recent data from the USGS. Monterey did its own climate assessment, and here's what they show by 2100. Actually, I think this is by 2030 to all the way to 2100. So the whole Monterey waterfront, all along where El Estero is going to be at risk because of how low it is in relation to sea level. And so that's going to be a whole series of challenges for the city of Monterey. They've identified these specific challenges in the report. So they've got stormwater outfalls that are at risk, their water supply, obviously coastal flooding, parking structures, public structures. So they've done actually a very good job of saying, okay, here are the things that we need to look at moving forward, and we need to start planning for. My sport, beach volleyball, it's going to be very challenging in the future. I've watched all the beaches where I grew up playing in Santa Barbara and in Southern California become smaller and smaller every year. And so in Santa Cruz, again, they have also seen a loss of significant beach. Probably a bigger impact, certainly a bigger impact, are the health issues. As we get a warmer California, diseases will be coming from the south, insect-borne diseases. We will expect to have more health issues associated with heat. There was a big series recently in the Los Angeles Times about the underreporting of heat illness and deaths in the California. So this is going to be, a health problem as much as any problem that we've encountered. And so, the pandemic, obviously a huge impact. I think health impacts from climate will eventually dwarf what we've seen with the pandemic. Okay, so that's the bad news. What to do about this? And hopefully I can give you some things to act on and tell you what Landwatch is doing, what we're trying to do to turn what we know into public policy. And I want to emphasize public policy because as important as individual actions are, we need to shift how public behavior in mass is happening. We need to shift the policies at the state and local level so that our cities and the way we are living on the planet just fundamentally changes. This is the dilemma we face here in the whole peninsula. I just kind of put the data up for Seaside. Every day, there's about 3,500 cars that drive into Seaside and about 9,500 that leave. And that, you can look at in Carmel, it's not as many leaving, it's a lot more coming in relative to the population. And every city on the peninsula has this imbalance between the number of cars and jobs and the number of people living there. So this is really the challenge. It's trying to better balance where people are working and how they're getting to their jobs. Our Governor Newsom has issued an executive order talking about trying to reach zero carbon by 2045. And Monterey County is looking at its own greenhouse gas inventory. And while that's happening, we're beginning, my organization, Landwatch, is working with climate scientists to come up with a model plan for cities. And there are really 3 areas that are critical to getting to zero carbon: transportation, natural gas, and land use. And I'm going to talk about what each of those look like in terms of the public policies if we want to get to zero carbon. So transportation, we really need to figure out how to favor electric vehicles over fossil fuel cars. Many more electric chargers. We need more public education on electric vehicles. We need to give preferential treatment and parking to electric vehicles. And we need to make everything associated with electric vehicles easier and faster. Bicycling has to be favored over driving. So anywhere we have an opportunity to put in a recreational path, something like 4TAG, where we can expand bicycling, that is absolutely critical to achieving zero emissions. Natural gas, really the solution is to phase out all natural gas in homes and commercial buildings by reforming building codes. And some cities are already doing this. Berkeley and other cities are requiring now that electric induction stoves and electric heating is the only thing that goes in new construction. So part of what we need to do is to explain to people why that's so critical. It's a change, certainly not an easy one for many people, but it's something that's absolutely critical if we want to get to zero emissions. And finally, this is where Landwatch works a lot. We need to really design our cities to be more bikeable and walkable and more affordable. So we need to build up and not out. We need to raise the height limits, reduce setbacks, allow for higher densities, allow for density bonuses for affordable housing, and really encourage more apartments and multifamily housing. Smaller housing, rental housing is going to be more affordable, and it's certainly going to be more appropriate to our local workforce than single family homes. The vision that Paris and Melbourne and other places around the country, around the world have is a 15-minute city. The idea that everything we do is within a 15-minute walk, bike, or public transportation. So that's the vision of sustainability. That kind of vision gets us to a zero carbon Monterey County, and that's really what Landwatch is going to be pushing in the next coming decades. So this is what success looks like. It looks like a vibrant downtown, multi-stories. It looks like areas where people are walking and gathering and not where there's a lot of cars. It looks like families on bikes and workers on bikes and people getting around in our community. If you've ever gone to Portland, if you've seen what it looks like in Europe, there is enormously more people, many more people commuting on bicycles, like unbelievably more. And yet our weather here is fabulous. And so this is something we really need to leverage, is getting people onto bikes and trying to figure out how we get, and e-bikes, how we get people away from cars. Buses, getting our public transportation system, and that really requires higher densities. We need to have cities with, large numbers of people on transportation corridors, and that will make public transportation a lot more effective. Sprawl is really what we want to stop. And right now we've got some very large annexations in Gonzales and Soledad. We have a lot of single family, low density subdivisions throughout Salinas Valley. And we don't know what's going to happen in Seaside East, but we really hope that the city is able to focus its development on urban infill and not become distracted with trying to develop low density anything on Seaside East. And that's a whole nother area of conversation. This is really what we see now in Monterey County every day on Highway 1 and 68, and this is what we have to change. So, you know, it is a bit of a dark time. What we're all looking at, what our children are looking at, our grandchildren is, it's definitely a challenge. It is, I think, I would say the most important challenge. It really is the issue of survival of people. And, you know, Americans are relatively lucky because we are a wealthy country. This is going to, climate change is really going to hit poor countries a lot harder. It's going to hit poor people in our country a lot harder. And so all the social equity issues, everything gets down to trying to figure out how to address climate change to make the pain less for everyone, and particularly for people that don't have the resources to deal with it. I like to say that tyranny of the status quo is our biggest hurdle. Jimmy Panetta, I heard him mention, somebody said he mentioned the narcotic of nostalgia. The future isn't going to look like the past. We really need to break out of looking at our cities like they are today and thinking about how they should be, not how they are, because a lot of what we've done is not going to be adaptable in the future. Our housing policy is climate policy, and housing policy is going to mean smaller homes, higher density homes in urban areas where there's public transportation or biking or walking. I think it's going to mean for many elected officials just speaking uncomfortable truths. And one of those truths is we're going to have to make some really hard decisions in places like Carmel, where there's tremendous inertia about change and a lot of looking back. I just tell people, hey, we have to look forward, and you can't look at what Carmel was, you have to look at what it's going to be. And I think the same is true for Seaside and Monterey and Salinas. Every city needs to address these really uncomfortable truths. I think Greta Thunberg and the young people that are coming along really are where hope is. And they are the radical hope. They are the people that are sitting in on schools, and they are calling out our elected officials. You know, nobody should be getting a free pass on climate, and nobody should be getting a free pass on bad housing decisions and bad transportation decisions. So we do this, Landwatch does this. It's not always something that, you know, I sometimes get difficult looks when I talk to my elected official or elected officials, but I think we have to speak the truth. And I think we're looking to the younger generation for that leadership. So, you know, I guess I'm going to finish up by saying, what kind of future do you want? And it's the question we all need to be asking ourselves. The best way to predict your future is to create it. And this is something that our first executive director, Gary Patton, would often say. Don't take for granted that what we have today is what it has to be. It's really up to us working at the grassroots level to be able to change the perceptions and the decisions of our elected officials. So in conclusion, I ask you, encourage you to trust the scientists, to realize that there's an uncertain future with unprecedented threats. The action that we need is going to be transformational. It's going to be driven by people like you who get up in front of city councils and write letters and do the things at a public policy level. And I really hope you all stay involved. I know you are involved. I hope you get involved in public policy and can live radical hope every day. And that's what I've got. So I will, this is a way to get a hold of me and Landwatch if you have any questions. You know, our website is pretty prominent. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
And I see already a hand up, Scott.
Unmute. So Mike, there's a problem that I've been attentive to for a while now, which has to do with housing. I was talking to some transportation folks and they said, you know, the traffic problems aren't a traffic problem, they're a housing problem. And we've known for a long time that we have a dearth of housing, you know, $300,000 and less. But I keep seeing these developments grow and they're, you know, being sold as second homes, and the affordable housing is even being reduced. So given sort of a capitalistic market and the desirability of the peninsula, do you have any further thoughts on how we handle the housing issues so that we reduce car use and achieve the Alvarado-like vision that you showed us?
So we have been advocating, and I think the city of Monterey is probably the best place, hire more apartments, higher density apartments. So in the downtown Monterey, they have recently rezoned a fairly large section down by El Estero for 4 stories. And it allows for multifamily apartments. They've done the same thing in Garden Road. So apartments are really where the economic ladder starts for people. You know, if you can make apartments affordable, people can save, and then you can go to a condo and a townhouse. And so we are advocating and continue to work with developers in every place that we work, in Gonzales and Salinas, to try to get more smaller units. And if we can shift that to having more apartments and fewer single family homes, you know, that's what our local workforce can afford. We look at very carefully, we look at the median income for people. We know Monterey County, I think it's like $75,000. So with that median income, and with 80% of all housing being created by the private market, you know, the nudge for local governments is nudge them towards smaller units and apartments. And, you know, really that's I think the only answer.
Thanks.
Robin, I see your hand up.
So thanks for your presentation. In order to build more houses and more apartments, we need more water. And the Board of Supervisors is looking at privatization of desal plants. So this brings us back to who should own water, the water producing plants and distribution. Should it be a public entity or a private entity? And I sit on the Sustainable Groundwater Agency Advisory Committee, and I'm an alternate to the board. So I know what's going on with the overdraft desalination in our area. It's not as dire a situation in the South County, but up in our area, it's pretty dire. So in order to concentrate the housing, you either give up housing you have and concentrate it, knock down, rebuild, so you're not increasing your water usage, or you turn to desal, because with saltwater intrusion and overdraft, it's pretty grim. So what do you recommend? With this in mind, what do you recommend?
So there's a whole host of things to, well, first of all, I'm sending everybody in the chat some references in response to Scott's question about housing and climate. So there's a whole host of things. So the question, there's a series of questions in there, Robin, and I want to maybe get to them one by one. First, let me say that Landwatch is really deeply involved with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. We have written, you know, a dozen letters. We have written it. I think probably the most important letter was to the Wade Crowfoot, to the Resources Agency. I would encourage you to read that. It's on our website. We've tried to look at where there might be opportunities for potential litigation around these subjects. So we have a lot of assets and resources in sustainability and groundwater. On the first topic you raised about ownership, we are a strong advocate of public ownership, and the reason is pretty simple. The system that we currently have, water is, there are monopolies, and so those monopolies on the peninsula, or Cal-Am, in other places, it's other water providers, and those monopolies are regulated or not by the California Public Utilities Commission. And if they're a private company, their rate of return is a function of their investment in capital projects. So private companies are highly incentivized to over-capitalize and build larger than they need. And that is what we clearly saw with the desal plant in Monterey, Cal-Am's plant. The cheaper alternatives, wastewater, advanced wastewater recycling, and groundwater storage from the Carmel River, were much, we looked at all the numbers, we ran them, we ran the economics, and there's no question that those are the things you want to do first. So on the specific issue of public versus private, we should really be trying to get water monopolies in the hands of private institutions. The issue of water availability in Salinas Valley, unfortunately, right now there aren't limits on water availability for either the cities or ag, and until the groundwater plans actually call for specific limits, I think we're going to continue to see over drafting of those aquifers. And so, what we would hope to see is, a long-term plan coming out of that process that would begin to put some boundaries on agricultural use of water and urban use. Agricultural use, I think, is about 80 to 90% of all the water. And so it's possible, I think, to still have growth in the cities north of Chular, Gonzales, that are most at risk of groundwater overdraft, but it's going to mean sort of rejiggering all the water budgets. And that's only going to happen through, through a regulatory process. The ag companies aren't going to do that on their own. So it's a really, really complicated subject, as you know, if you've been involved. And I would point you to our website and, the dozens of papers and things that we've written about the topic. So.
All right, next up, Karen Anderson. Karen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. My question is regarding, well, you already showed that great map of how many vehicles are driving out of Seaside versus driving into Seaside. So there's a lot of housing of people who work elsewhere happening in Seaside. And I'm in Marina, where all the new houses are these massive ones. And I don't know if they're planning for them to be multi-family homes or not. But whenever we try to increase housing density, the issue that's coming up around Marina and possibly statewide, because we have this come up with an apartment building that was being built, was that it really limited the number of parking places, not even one per unit or one per bedroom to this. And this was a state regulation. And, the streets are getting really crowded with so many cars on the streets. And it's just something, how can that change when transportation isn't that easy for getting people to from where they live to where they work? So it's just it's a big dilemma that I see.
Yeah, again, I think it's really a very, very significant challenge. It's what people have been doing for years, is driving in cars and, parking. I mean, there are still cities that require off-street parking, and a garage is $50,000 to build. That could be a living unit for somebody. So we continue to make you know, the laws that have been passed over the last 30 years have been laws that sort of favor cars, whether they're parking laws or, you know, how we design our streets. And I think all those things need to be re-examined. I mean, you know, it shouldn't be easy to get from one place to another on a car. It should be really easy in a bike or an e-bike, or, you know, so we need to really be thinking about how do we shift that? Because if we keep going down the path of, you know, everybody relying on their car, we are never going to get to, you know, zero carbon. It just isn't going to happen. So.
Karen Harris.
Thanks, Mike. That was a really great discussion and information that you've been providing. And my question is about the source of the power. How do we get the electricity? How do we get the power for the electricity? I know in a lot statewide, it's about 37% is from natural gas, which we're trying to reduce in your report there. So I just received this community's electricity report and where the power is coming from, the source of it, and they're looking at a lot more solar and wind generated electricity. So if we're going to transfer over to just electricity, how do we get the whole grid to be green?
So that is not an area of my expertise. I do know that the challenges you identified are ones I'm aware of. And, you know, I think at the state level, there's been more legislation that is requiring, you know, rooftop solar. You know, the state is sort of struggling with how quickly can it phase out natural gas without creating blackouts. So, you know, these are issues that the State Public Utility Commission and the Energy Commission are really grappling with. They're outside my area of expertise. Certainly one area I do know that's hugely important is batteries, and having, you know, for example, the Moss Landing plant that's now being retrofitted to have storage, because, you know, you create a lot of energy during the day with solar and you need some place to put that energy. And so we need these massive industrial scale power storage plants. But, you know, that's is really beyond what Landwatch does. And we don't really focus on statewide energy, the grid. But I know people that do and organizations that do. I'm happy to put them in touch with them. So.
Well, they've said, Mike, that that natural gas is more efficient for some like heating than electricity. So a lot of people had switched over to natural gas in the past. So, but now we know a lot more. So I think it's going to be really challenging. You know, if we switch like natural gas for the cars, you know, electric cars, if we plug in at our homes, we can use our solar panels, which is great. But like you said, we're going to need batteries, and I don't know how many years the batteries last, but would that end up going into the landfills? It just seems to be a whole lot of extra discussion to be had about where we get our power and to fuel these electric vehicles too.
Right, and you know, again, I think those discussions are taking place. They're principally at the state level because local governments don't have a lot to do with the grid.
All right, Robin, again. Robin?
Yes. The city of Salinas is working on their general plan update, and they're also required to have a climate action plan as well as part with the general plan update. All cities in California are required to have this climate action plan. So what do you know about what's required by the state to go into these plans, and how can the plans be used to help direct the rest of the general plan? Because in my view, we should have the climate action plan up first and let that drive what the general plan will do to implement the climate action plan. So that's what I'm on the steering committee for the general plan update, and I'm gonna try to steer the direction of the plan to do this, to look at what climate adaptations we need to do.
Oops, Robin, we lost your audio.
Hello, Robin?
Yeah,
With
looks
the
like
new
we lost.
state law. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm sorry, but that's been recently passed, so that should also affect a lot of the future building that'll go.
Robin, if you're done with your comments, I'll let Mike respond.
So Robin, I'm happy to share with you some of the materials we've shared with the city.
I'm sorry, you're cutting in and out, Michael.
Yeah, we've lost your audio a couple of times, Robin. So I don't know if you need to go out and rejoin.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'll rejoin.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll hold that, and if there's another question, I can wait till Robin gets back on.
Okay, Leticia.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment about the charging stations. My sister, she just recently purchased an electric vehicle, and one of her challenges is finding a charging station. She lives in a house or in an apartment building that does not have any type of garage. So I think even like street options maybe, or like little stalls in neighborhoods with EV charging stations would be great, because she has to drive like a good amount, like she has to budget her energy in her vehicle to make sure she can get to those stations. And so it's just an interesting thing. But I did also want to ask a question in regards to what can agriculture do? I know Sustainable Salinas just recently watched Kiss the Ground, which talks about how we can utilize agriculture systems to really, sequester our carbon into the soil. And it presents it as like in a hopeful way. So how could we speed up processes like that? And what can be done in that side of things?
So another topic I'm not an expert in, which is carbon sequestration by agriculture. I've got some, I've looked at some research that suggests it's pretty darn hard. It's not a the process of actually making sure the carbon gets into the soil is challenging. So we haven't looked at that in detail. I mean, I guess I could send you what I know, but it wouldn't, I don't feel like I have a good expertise in that area. So, sorry.
Thank you.
But on the charging station, we have all kinds of suggestions about what city policies could be changed to address that. So on that one, I think that can be quite helpful. Robin, on your question about climate action plans, we have shared materials with the city of Seaside. I think one of the first issues that has come up is that some of the data that cities in the county have gotten from AMBAG on the greenhouse gas inventories has been inaccurate. Some of the modeling data that they received, we have drawn attention to, kind of errors in the technical analysis, and I've shared that information with a number of elected officials, including a few on this call. So the first most important thing is making sure the inventory is right. And so I'm happy to send you what we know. Conceptually, I would hazard a guess that what I laid out in the model policies for transportation, natural gas, and land use apply to Salinas as they would to anywhere else. And I would say that as the city looks at its general plan, really looking at very radical changes in land use regulations that make it easier to build apartments, make it easier to build smaller units, is probably the most important thing they can do for climate mitigation. Climate adaptation, in my view, is probably, it's important that we address things like, tree cover, sea level rise on the coastal areas. But really the first thing we need to do is figure out how to reduce the greenhouse gases we're putting into the atmosphere today. And so that's why so much of our focus is on trying to redesign cities from the ground up and trying to get that as the focus for what cities are doing. So.
Okay, I see we have another question, Yavuz, but before we go to him, we're coming up on the hour. I want to respect everybody's time and thank anyone who needs to leave right at the hour for attending and for contributing to our discussions. All of the LAG leaders for your great reports. Thank you so much. I so appreciate hearing from you. I'm sure everyone else does too. And of course, thanks to Michael DeLapa for this really excellent presentation and discussion. I invite any of you who can stay any longer to listen to the last answers to any questions we have. But if you must leave, again, I thank you for your attendance and your participation. Okay, Yavuz, go ahead and.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Michael, for the eye-opening presentation. Now, just want to comment about we have Monterey Air Resources District, and they give incentive money to funding to electrical vehicles, and now recently to e-bikes, and they've been also giving refunds for gas stove replacement. Wood stove replacement. Hopefully, maybe in the coming years we'll have gas stove replacement to switch to electric. And I have a couple of friends, they commute from Salinas to Monterey Peninsula, and they spend about 50-60 minutes every day. And I just want to point out, about the housing prices. Because of the COVID now, everybody discovered working remotely, especially from Silicon Valley. And we've been our local communities, my wife is in the real estate business, and, a lot of competition, becomes an auction, and our locals being auctioned off by the invading, Silicon Valley crowds, and, they cannot afford living in the peninsula. So they've been pushed towards Salinas or towards South County. I don't know if there is any protection from our cities towards this, and give priority to our locals, because that's at the end, we're going to be suffering from that.
Let me mention a couple of things. Again, I wanted to mention November 5th. You're all invited to that. I'm happy to make this presentation available on our website. So if you would like that, let me know. Yavu, so one of the things that we've seen in the agricultural industry over the last 5 years is a lot of employer-built housing. So Tanamura and Antle and a number of other ag companies built housing for workers. It's fabulous. They really identified it as a human need and as an economic need. And so that's happening. Pebble Beach Company did the same thing for its employees. Again, really positive. We would love to see more hospitality businesses do that, either as a coalition or, there's some very large hospitality groups that could do that. Schools are talking about having housing for teachers. Cities could have housing built on city land for city employees. So there's a lot of really creative ways. You can't, if you build on private land, you cannot reserve because of fair housing laws, you cannot set housing aside just for local people in that community. So you have these restrictions. You can do it by income levels, but again, it's not, those can be all over the county or other places. But if a private company or a public agency builds something, they can decide who lives there. And I think hopefully we're going to see more of our schools, because it's, turnover of teachers is a big deal, and turnover of public employees is a big deal. We would love to see more of that. The university, I think CSUMB has done a pretty good job. The other institutions, not so great. So, that's a real opportunity, that we should promote.
Great, thank you.
Kim, Shirley.
Yeah, thank you. Michael, thank you for your presentation. I know you're speaking to the choir here, but it's great. It's great. It's good to go through the science and everything. I always appreciate it. So I want to thank you for that. I want to go back to your comment about the greenhouse gas inventories that are coming out of AMBAG. I know you have, some feeling that they're inaccurate. So I'm wondering, as jurisdictions, I didn't hear anything back from AMBAG. I don't know if they've addressed those greenhouse gas inventories. So what would be your recommendation for jurisdictions moving forward when we do? Because I think we are going to be getting those inventories soon. So I'm just wondering what your advice on moving forward with that is.
Well, the key issue there are two key issues. One was they weren't using an origin destination model for the greenhouse gases. So the models aren't accounting for the movement of cars across areas for commuting. They're sort of, we looked at the model they ran for Carmel, and it basically was just cities within car travel within the city. So that's the key piece. And I think, you should just ask AMBAG, hey, you need to give us the right numbers, because otherwise those numbers are meaningless. If you're just counting the number of cars that are moving within the city, it misses all of the commute traffic, which is really the big issue for everybody. So, and then they had this other artifact of, we identified it was more of a technical problem. And, we never heard back if they corrected those things or addressed them. So I don't know. The other thing I guess I should point out is another big area that's going to come to play over the next year is the regional housing needs assessment allocations. And we are going to be very involved in those allocations with a view to making sure that housing is put in cities and not in unincorporated county areas that aren't already urbanized. So there's some urbanized areas, Castroville or Spreckles, where, yeah, sure, it makes sense to have housing. But really, we need to be getting the regional housing needs allocations put in places where there are public services, and it addresses all the things that I raised earlier. So that's another important role AMBAG's going to have, and we're trying to sort of understand where they are with that process too. And I would encourage you and others, our elected officials who have regular interactions, to continue to ask those questions of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, next month actually, AMBAG is going to be we're going to be approving that methodology for the RENA number. So I'm looking at my notes. A lot of it is looking at employment. So 85% is looking at employment. Obviously, a lot of it is looking at just housing growth. But then another small percentage is looking around where transit is, and then resiliency. I think they want to avoid places, right, that have lots of risk for sea level rise and also for wildfires. And then they're looking at how they're going to adjust those income levels for the affirmatively furthering the fair housing that they need to do in terms of low, very low, moderate income and above moderate. So I think that, we were having those discussions. So I would love it if Landwatch was a part of that. So since we're going to be approving that methodology in November, and then that'll go off, and HCD has to approve that methodology before they come back. So they were giving us sort of sample RENA numbers this past week. So for each jurisdiction based off that methodology that they're using.
If you could send that to me, that would be great. We haven't seen that, and we've been asking for it. So
okay.
That would be really great.
Yeah. It's in the packet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can send that to you. Sure.
Okay, much appreciated.
Mhm.
You know, I guess a lot of what we do is kind of behind the scenes and pretty darn technical. And I think some people don't, you know, they see Landwatch and they kind of don't always know what we're doing. And we've got this sort of, you know, whether it's science, economics, law, you know, this is sort of the areas that we work best in. And, you know, I love doing grassroots stuff like this, but, you know, frankly, my bandwidth is pretty limited. We're really looking for a deputy director. So if anybody knows somebody who can help us in the Salinas Valley, I would love to have some referrals. So if you know anybody, let me know.
All right. Well, I'll make an ad too we are looking for a vice president of outreach for CSMC. And so as you're thinking of candidates to send to Michael DeLapa, we would be happy to have some people sent our way as well, because it is a big county and we only have so many, in our case, volunteer hours that any of us have to devote to this effort. Again, I want to thank Michael for the time he's taken. I know he is in very high demand as a speaker and going about the many things that he just described Landwatch is involved with. And I agree, we are in some ways speaking to the choir, but you're also providing concepts and vocabulary to all of our members as we go out, each one of us, to speak to our audiences, whoever they may be and wherever they may be. Hopefully some of them are elected officials, to help us express what influence we wish to bring to bear. So thank you so very much. This is recorded and we will have a clipped edited version of just your talk and perhaps the question and answer period available to the membership that couldn't come to this brunch, but also available to anybody who wants to access it through our website. So again, thank you so much. Ellen, did you have a final comment?
Yes, I was just noticing that this meeting today is of allowing a cross-pollination.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so thank you to each and for this overall effect.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time. I know coming to another Zoom meeting sometimes seems like the one thing over the top, but we have endeavored to keep this quarterly meeting going. Perhaps in the next quarter, in the new year, we will get to be all in the same room. Once again, for those of you eligible, get your booster. For those of you who haven't gotten your shot, please go get your immunization against this virus. Let's turn the page and get together again. All right. Thank you all so very much. I wish you enjoyment of this beautiful fall day we have.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you, Bruce.
See you.